Hey there, welcome. On a few minutes early, we're having this little mini workshop, the three secrets to understanding, to unlocking the mysteries of the chakras. If you're watching the replay, you might want to forward about 5 minutes because I'm not going to start for 5 minutes. I just came on a little early so folks can find me before I get started. This is also an Ask Me Anything session, so you're welcome to type questions that you might have in the chat box. I should be able to see them. I'm live streaming with StreamYard, and that is going to two of my subtle yoga, two of my Facebook pages, and then also to YouTube. So if you're here, to go ahead and type something in the comment box just to say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm coming from wherever," and that will let me know that. That'll let me know that I'm getting the messages through StreamYard and I don't have to go over to Facebook. So again, I'm not going to start until 12 o'clock here. I'm on Eastern time in the United States. So it'll be about 4 minutes till I get started. This is just an opportunity for folks to come on, to think about what questions you might have about the chakras. Welcome. I see a bunch of people are here, so welcome. It's nice to have you here. Hi, Angela from Bristow. Thank you. And hey, Judy from Michigan. Welcome. That's great. If you could leave a little comment, because that helps me know that everything's working and I'll be able to see your questions. And yeah, I'll be able to see your questions and the audio's working okay and the videos, all that stuff. So hi, Melissa from Florida. Welcome. Nice to have you here. If you're watching the replay, go ahead and forward 3-4 minutes if you want to, till when I start getting into the heart of the conversation. I'm going to be discussing 3 key processes, if you like, that are, I don't even know if the word's process. There's 3 aspects that I think are super important for our approaching the chakra system and sort of this revolution that's been happening in the past 2-3 years or so in the yoga world. That is where we're opening up more and saying, like, we have to get back to the roots. We have to avoid cultural appropriation. We need to really understand what the yogis were talking about and stop kind of making stuff up. There's a difference between being creative and making stuff up. Like, creativity is awesome and wonderful, and we have to just make sure that we're balancing that. So again, I'm not going to start for a couple more minutes, so feel free to leave a comment. Just let me know you're here. And this is a great place to leave questions. Do you have questions about the chakras? It's a great place to leave questions. Hi, Carolyn. Welcome from Birmingham, Alabama. Nice to see you. And Jane is here from Pennsylvania. Sue from Hi, Sue. Nice to see you. Sue's an old friend from Chattanooga and one of the grandmother of yoga in Chattanooga. She's awesome. And let's see, Brenda's here. Hi, Brenda from Bismarck. I know so many of you. It's so nice. And Kristen O'Donnell, you won a prize this week. I think you might have known that, but you won one of the prizes in the challenge. Make sure you talk to Stacy, support at subtleyoga.com to get your prize. Hi, Pamela from Kentucky. And Karen is here from Michigan. Welcome. And Beth is here. Hi, Beth. And Barbara from Petaluma. Welcome. I love Petaluma. And once I rode my bike there from San Francisco when I was young. It was so beautiful. Let's see. Jackie's here from Somerset in England. Welcome. I heard you guys had a little bit of wind. I don't know if that was in your part of the country, but I heard from Helen that there was some pretty big storms. So I hope you're okay. Let's see. Annette is here from Madison. You registered for the course. I hope you're digging in and finding some good stuff. Let's see. Greta, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, from Denmark. Welcome. And we have somebody from Burlington. Welcome. And Mary's here from Maine. And Babette from Sarasota. Welcome. Jackie's here. It's very, very windy. So maybe you're in the UK. Tracy's here from New Mexico. Hi, Tracy. I hope you're feeling better. Okay, so we've got about 1 minute before we get going here. I just want to let whoever else wants to come on. And if you're watching the replay, of course, you can just forward it about a minute or so before I jump in. So this is a great time to ask questions. If you've had these burning questions about chakras, go ahead and put them in the chat box. And that's my whole point. I'm going to do a little intro and talk about these 3 keys to unlocking the mystery of the chakras. The three things that I think are really important. Um, after that, then it will be time for questions. I received probably 200 questions about the chakras when I asked on my email list. So I got a lot of questions, and some of them were, some of them were like similar, and then some of them were kind of intersecting with what has been going on for the past 50 years in the West. Well, even longer than that, almost 100 years, but like 50 years pretty intensively since the New Age chakra system has started to become a thing. So some of the questions are kind of like related to that, and I hope I can kind of sort that out a little bit. And then answer other questions you may have as well. Okay, so let's go ahead. It's just on the hour right now, so let's go ahead and get started. I know some folks will be joining late. That's fine. I want to thank you so much for being here. It's really nice to get to spend a little time. Did you bring tea? I brought a cup of tea, although I drank most of it already. You can bring coffee. I don't mind if you drink coffee. It's just not for me. Okay. So the first thing, before I talk about these kind of unlocking the mysteries of the chakras, I want to talk about situating or contextualizing, right? So the context of this conversation, because I always like to do that before I teach anything. It's like, what are we talking about anyway? And what are we talking about when we say chakras? Because that means so many different things. There's so many people. So I want to kind of distill it a little bit and contextualize it, what I mean. And let me be really clear from the gate. As a yoga teacher, I want to learn about chakras from yoga teachers and yoga masters and yoga therapists and folks that are really steeped in the yoga world. And that's one of the biggest problems about the way that chakras are taught in the West, is that most of it came from folks who are not steeped in the yoga tradition. They're not part of the yoga. They're teaching something, and there's many authorities like that are, great at reading energy bodies and stuff. That's wonderful. But all the way back in the 1920s, when the first kind of new age book about the chakras came out, which was called The Chakras by Charles Leadbeater. And that's really the prototypical chakra book, right? So all the way back then, almost 100 years ago, there were people saying, okay, that's fine if you want to read auras and see energy fields and stuff, but please don't call it chakras. Call it something else so that we can distinguish. But that didn't happen. The word chakra really stuck, actually became chakra. Most of you know, it got kind of changed. But that word stuck, and that became sort of the basis for the development of the New Age chakra system. So here's this guy, Ken Dykewald, who's now is like a psychotherapist, and he specializes in aging. But he was at the Esalen Institute in the 1970s. And Abraham Maslow was making lots of Abraham Maslow and his wife were driving down from California, Route 1 in California. They were driving down from, I think, Portland or Seattle I guess they were going down the coast, and they needed a place to stay. So they thought they were pulling into like an inn, and it turned out to be the Esalen Institute. And at that time, at the Esalen Institute, Ken Dykewald and his hippie friends, they're cool. I'm not like saying hippie in a pejorative way. They were really cool, interesting, like forward-thinking people. They were totally getting into the chakras. And then Maslow comes along and they're like, Maslow, chakras, and they, glommed that whole thing together. But what they didn't have was anybody really translating the chakras to them who understood chakras from a yoga perspective. Like, for example, Carl Jung, who gave 4 lectures in 1932 to the Zurich Psychological Club about the chakras, but that stuff was not published widely. It was not widely available until 1996. So here's Ken Dykewald, and these people are like trying to figure out, like, I have respect for them for sure. They're trying to figure out the mysteries of this stuff. They did not have the internet. They didn't have access to good translations. There were very few yoga scholars studying the chakras back then. They were making all this stuff up and kind of, and not necessarily completely wrong. I don't want to say that, but they were very creative, and they weren't necessarily going back into the source material. So that's the context I want to sort of start with. And then the next piece of that context is that the yogis were not so interested in this individual self-actualization, enlightenment stuff. I mean, they were interested in it, but in a different way, What they were not necessarily looking at, how do I manipulate this stuff? And they certainly weren't looking at it like, how does somebody else manipulate my chakras? Except for gurus. Sometimes gurus would have their danda, their stick, and kind of touch the chakra, but except for that, there was, the yogis were just like into working with the chakras as a way for themselves to start to merge into the oneness of the universe. So a big piece here is this idea of as above, so below. And this is in the Shiva Samhita, which is a text that came out, that some scholars say it came out around the 1600s. But Mallinson, who is one of the foremost tantric scholars in the world right now, says it's earlier, probably around the 1300s. At any rate, this text says, Tre loke yani bhutani tani sarvani dehataha, which means approximately, whatever exists in this world also exists within you. Oops. My computer just shut down. I hope I didn't go away. I just had a little glitch. Am I still here? It looks like there's a bunch of people here. Did you get the glitch, or was it just me? I was like, I went away. Everything okay? Is anybody out there? I hope I didn't go away. It looks like I might have, though, because I'm not seeing any comments. Oh, Annette said, just me. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I was like, maybe I went away. Okay, thanks, everybody. Sorry about that. So I was on a roll there talking about this idea of whatever exists outside also exists within us, right? Whatever exists on the outside also exists within us. If you can understand that idea, that key idea, whatever is out there is also in, then you're going to start to understand the chakras from a deeper perspective, from a tantric perspective. Let me tell you a little story before I keep going on. It was about, 15 years ago, maybe longer, maybe 20 years ago. And I was with my husband, and we were out Christmas shopping, and we were at the mall, and we just were like wandering around. My husband loves to go to Barnes and Noble, or Borders at the time. I think Borders was still existing, but he loves going to bookstores. So we went to the bookstore, and as we walked into the bookstore, there was a display table. And on that display table, it had Christmas gifts, and the whole table was full of this Christmas gift, and it said Chakra Balancing Kit. And there's this little box, and inside you had like a little flag with different colors and essential oils and some different gemstones. And I think there were some like affirmations or something. And it said on sale, $12.99. And I was like, that sort of sums up the whole challenge here, which is that in the West, you can balance your chakras at the bargain rate of $12.99, and it's completely missing the whole point, which is that chakras are your reflection of the entire universe. They're everything about you, your psychology, your physiology, your story, your genetic imprints from the past. They're everything. And you can balance them for $12.99. That it's so reductive. And not only is it reductive, it's kind of offensive, actually, to take something so deep and so meaningful and to narrow it down to a Christmas gift, a little gadgety, gimmicky Christmas gift. And so that's what kind of got me started on the whole, on exploring the chakras, because I thought there's got to be, I learned this stuff from my teachers in India, and it was so deep and so meaningful. And then, you can get like a gazillion chakra books. Like I even approached a publisher last year, and I was like, I've got this idea for this chart. And he was like, wow, there's too much in that space. Like, there's too many chakra books. And he was like, write something else. But I have such a strong longing to write about this that I'm going to do it. I don't know if anybody's going to, I'll have to self-publish it. I don't know. But when you go to, if you go to Barnes and Noble, if you just go on Amazon and look through all the books on chakras, they all are kind of repeating. Okay, I'm going to be a little bit judgy, but there's a little bit of, I get a little bit nauseated because they all repeat the same stuff. And it isn't necessarily that deep or meaningful. Some of it is, and I don't want to dismiss folks who've really benefited from the New Age chakra system. Like, if you've benefited from it, you've benefited from it. I would never, ever dismiss somebody's experience. And what I would suggest, and I get a little nauseated just because I've read so much, but what I would suggest is that there's a deeper way. There's a more expansive way. And so when we think about ourselves as the universe, I live in Asheville, and many people have this bumper sticker that says all one. And it's lovely. It's a lovely sentiment. The chakras explain how we're all one. That's what's so interesting about them. That's what's so important. That's why I put together this course, the neuroscience and psychology of the chakras. And, I put it out yesterday. The course came out yesterday, and I already have to make an update on the course because there's so much amazing. I found another article today, and I was like, oh, it blew my mind. I wish I had found it before I finished the course, but that's okay. It's easy with digital stuff. I'm going to update it. And this course is going to continue to be updated, as I find more information. It's exciting what's going on out there. Really exciting. Okay. So I hope the sound is, let's see. Somebody said the sound is coming and going. I hope the sound is better, Allison. I hope it's okay. Carolyn just asked, am I back in Asheville? Yes, I'm back in Asheville. We lived in New Zealand for a while, but we came back. All right, let me get through it. Let me talk about these 3 keys to understanding the chakras, and then I will go right into the questions. Okay, so here's the first one. Elements, right? So the elements are these 5 great elements. Mahatattva, they're called sometimes, or Mahabhuta, depending on, anyway. They have different names in Sanskrit, but typically they're called the tattvas or the mahatattvas. So these are the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, or more accurately, the solid factor, the liquid factor, the luminous factor, the aerial factor, and the ethereal factor, because it's not exactly like the earth. It's the building blocks that make the earth, right? So these are the building blocks of everything that we see, of the manifest reality. And they unfold from Purusha and Prakriti. They unfold from, if you go through like Sankhya cosmology or Kashmiri Shaiva's cosmology, there's this idea like we have a oneness, and out of the oneness comes the 10,000 things. That's actually from Taoism, but it's similar. Everything unfolds from this oneness. And the perspective here, when you understand the elements, is elements are making up this, my physical body. That's Ayurveda, right? And elements also are the raw material of the mind, the mental, emotional parts of the mind. They're the raw material that make up our mental, emotional states. How does that work? It's because the subtle, the mind starts to evolve out of these subtle elements. And part of the work of yoga is to fold, or this whole intention is to fold the elements back up to get back to that idea of oneness, right? So chakras are the way that the elements organize themselves in you in terms of your physiology, and then more subtle in terms of the neuroendocrine immune structures, and more subtle in terms of psycho-emotional states. I'll let that sit there for a moment. Right? So, because it's complex, it's dense. But when we start to understand the elements, then we can start to understand the chakras in a much deeper way. Now, there are people out there who say that, no, the elements aren't in the chakras. Well, or you could just put whatever element in whatever chakra. I've heard that before. And I would suggest that's not accurate, because there's a couple of reasons. One is that the 5 lower chakras correlate with embryologically with the 5 different parts of the spine: coccyx, sacrum, lumbar, thoracic, cervical, right? And then you have the upper 2 chakras correlating with 2 very transitional parts of the brain stem and the midbrain, and all this fascinating stuff that goes on with the orienting response and the superior colliculi and the periaqueductal gray, in that area. That's all about intrinsic emotions. And then between the midbrain and the front brain and all the fascinating stuff that goes on at that intersection between rational thought and emotion. So those are 7 very important embryological organizing parts of the human system. And it's highly likely that they correlate with these 7 chakras. Now, the 5 parts that I was talking about, the 5 parts of the spine, the 5 lower chakras, they're the ones that are correlated most strongly with all of our mental emotional states. And so these 5 elements make up the physical structure, and these 5 elements are the raw material. They are the mythic consciousness material that organize in themselves to create our mental emotional states. So understanding the elements helps you to understand the chakras. And the chakras, by the way, are all surrounded by petals. And those petals, in those petals, the yogis understood many mental emotional states. Like, for example, in your 3rd chakra, they understood that lajja, shame, is there. They understood that feelings of shame, shyness, feelings of irritation are in the 3rd chakra. They understood that in the 2nd chakra, there's a deep kind of fear, a fear of that is very much related to this life and perhaps genetic trauma. We know that trauma shows up in our bodies up to 3 generations in human studies later. So people say, oh, I don't have any trauma. And I'm like, talk to your ancestors, because just about everybody shows up on this planet with some trauma. So, so the yogis understood that there was this encoding in these 5 lower chakras of mental emotional states. And the whole purpose of yoga is to fold those elements back up into mind. My computer keeps just crashing on me, and it's plugged in, so I'm not sure why. Anyway, it's related to I'm sorry, I got lost there because my computer keeps going down. Anyway, it's where was I going? The 5 elements, okay, and related to these states of mind, and the petals being related to states of mind. Okay, I wanted to say one more thing, because one of the questions I got was about koshas. Like, how do the koshas correlate with chakras? The koshas correlate with chakras in I wouldn't say seamless way, but in an interesting way, in the sense that as we go deeper into our koshas, we have deeper access and deeper control over the mental emotional states. So if you are in the outermost layer of Manomaya kosha, for example, the very sort of coarse aspect of mind that just sort of reacts to things, if you're there, you have very little control over your emotions, right? But the practices of yoga are meant to drive that awareness deeper and deeper into the deeper aspects of Manomaya, the part of ourselves that can reflect into Vijnanamaya kosha, the parts of ourselves that can really see what is real and then see what is illusory, and then also into Anandamaya kosha. And Anandamaya kosha is the kosha where we really connect to the source, connect to our bliss, connect to that limitless power that comes from this place of oneness. So the practices of yoga are intended to drive your control of the chakras deeper and deeper into these deeper koshas. So that's the intersection. It's not just like, oh, Muladhara is connected to Annamaya kosha, and Swadhisthana is connected to. I've seen that, and that's actually, in my opinion, would be way too reductive. It doesn't take into the subtleties of mind. And all the chakras, by the way, are controlled by the master gland, by the 6th chakra, Agya chakra. And that's what the scientists understand about the autonomic nervous system as well. So anyway, I'm getting a little off track. Let me finish the next 2 things, and then we'll do questions. Okay, so the second one is Kundalini. So understanding Kundalini and the call of the Kundalini as an evolutionary longing is a way we can more deeply understand the chakras. So my dear friend, Dr. Shaman Hatley, has written probably the most definitive article on Kundalini of all the scholars. It's called Kundalini, if you want to read it. And what Shaman explains, and this is so important to understand, because there's all this stuff out there that says Kundalini comes down and Kundalini goes back up. And Shaman's like, no, that's not what they were talking about. Kundalini coming down is the emanative force. It's the force of creation that brings us into being, and that, brings the world into creation. And then Kundalini is the force that drives us back towards oneness. And so that's the part of ourselves that is, that are interested in co-creating and co-participating in our evolutionary process. Right. So I think that's a key thing to understand. And now what I've just discovered about Kundalini is there's a fiber that goes from the brain all the way down to the bottom of the spinal cord that they've known about, which is called Resner's fiber. And it has oxytocin, cannabinoid complexes, opioids, and psychedelic receptors in it. I was like, when I found this thing, I was like, oh my God, it's totally the Kundalini. And it's a nano width. And the yogis said that. I think the size of the Kundalini is like, I can't remember exactly, but it's like 1/1000th of a horsehair or something. It's tiny, tiny. And it's nano. It's really tiny, but it possibly will be correlated with this idea of Kundalini. It's fascinating, or at least the central channel, if not Kundalini itself. So the central channel everybody has, but then whether or not Kundalini wakes up and starts you on that process is a different idea, So that's the second part, is this idea of Kundalini. Like when we start to understand that Kundalini is this driving force of the universe, and it's compelling this evolution, if you like, and it's compelling our personal evolution and the evolution of the whole universe, then we start to understand again in this kind of bigger macro cosmic way the role of chakras. Because what are chakras about? They're parts of ourselves that the Kundalini has to break through, has to get through. So you think about like, oh, you've got this issue around your mother-in-law or whatever, or, this neighbor who drives you crazy and complains about the garbage. That happened to me because the bears got into our garbage and the neighbor was really uptight about it. It's like, we all have to deal with that. And we can be like, oh my God, I hate you, and go through all that petty stuff, because that brings up our own mental, emotional vrittis, our tendencies. Or we can reflect, right, and be like, okay, well, that's just that experience and I can move through. And then we're reclaiming that energy. And this is Harish Johari. His book, by the way, if you're interested in like more authentic books about the chakras, his book is more authentic. It's called Chakras, Energy Centers of Transformation. But anyway, in his book, he talks about chakras being the way that we reclaim mental, emotional energy and use it for spiritual growth. And that's it right there. What I was just, that makes so much sense. So understanding Kundalini is going to be critical. Understanding the tattvas, the elements, is also critical, and understanding this ascent. Okay, and then the last thing I want to talk about, the number 3 key mystery to unlocking the chakras, is subtlety. Because it's this subtle reflection. It's time of quiet and internal awareness. It's the capacity to hone your skill of interoception so well, and so refine it so well that you start to perceive that there are energy centers in the body, which may be biofields, by the way. That's another thing I talk about in the course. At that moment, then we start to have a capacity to understand chakras in a different way. And by the way, it's not like, you have to be able to see colors or have psychic experience. It's none of that. It's just every day taking some time to tune in to awareness, the messages your body wants to give you, connecting to your higher self, and however that manifests for you. All of that helps you to understand the chakras in a different way. And it will help you to understand life, and it will help you to understand people in a different way. This is why I call what I teach subtle yoga, because I think it's the subtlety that often gets missed in our cultures. Okay, so I hope that was a good little introduction for you. I want to thank you all for being here. Feel free to leave a comment. It's nice to have you. And this is a great time for questions. So I'm just scrolling through what I can see here. Please answer a question about third chakra at the diaphragm level versus the belly. I'm happy to answer that, Anne. So Nabi chakra is one of the classic names of the third chakra, Nabi. And Nabi means navel. It means the navel, right? And this makes perfect sense when you think about the navel being the first place through which you receive nutrition, right? And the third chakra is all about this fire of transformation. It's all about the fire. It's all about how we take in food, we transform it into nutrition, we transform it into blood. We take in experiences, we transform them into wisdom, hopefully, or into awareness about things that we don't want to encounter again. It's all that kind of possibility. So that's why Nabi chakra makes sense that it's at the navel. Now, why did it get changed into solar plexus? I think that has something to do with Charles Leadbeater and the Theosophists. I think there's some possibility that that's why it got changed there. Also, it's a highly innervated place. This area right below the ribs is highly innervated place, full of nerve endings. You get stomach pain there. There's very important acupuncture points there. So the way that I like to describe it is I don't want to dismiss the solar plexus as the third chakra. I think it's part of it. I think it's a large fiery chakra, and the energy is certainly up in the solar plexus. But the distinction is in what is called kshetram. Kshetram is the Sanskrit word for focal point. So everybody knows this kshetram because it's used all the time in many meditation styles, right between the third eye, and which makes sense. That's where the orbital medial prefrontal cortex is, which is a fascinating part of the brain that has a link that links up emotions and front brain executive function processes, right? So at any rate, everybody knows this as kshetram, the focal point, even though you might not use that word. And I learned the word kshetram, I think, from Bihar School of Yoga. I'm pretty sure that's where they use that word. So not all the traditions use that word, but that's one of the schools that uses it. Okay, so the focal point for the third chakra when you're meditating, when you're doing asanas to focus on that area, is the navel. That doesn't mean that it doesn't affect the solar plexus, but it's the navel area. So I hope that's helpful, Anne. Let's see. I'm going to see there's a couple other questions that have come in. Feel free to put your questions in here because that's what it's all about. Is there a good book on chakras that you recommend? Beth asked that. Yeah, I mean, I'm writing one, but the one I would recommend, I mean, there's a lot. I've gotten information from many, many different sources. If you want something that's like more part of the yoga tradition, check out Harish Johari's book, Chakras, Energy Centers of Transformation. Brenda said, each of us are one of the universe which resides within us. What is within is without. Yes, that's Brenda. That's it. You got it, Brenda. You put question marks, but you're just basically summarizing what I said. Let's see. And then there's from Mary on the subject of books. Have you heard of Ambika Waters, The Book of Chakras? Yes, I have, and I have that book and I've read it, and it's very traditional if you want kind of the traditional take. What I'm doing that's a little different is I'm interpreting some of the iconography, and I use kind of a Jungian lens for that, a little bit of Joseph Campbell as well, but also certainly the myths that come out of the Puranas and the Tantra, mostly Puranas and other Indian texts. And I'm also connecting it to neuroscience. That's what I'm doing differently here. Karen asked, would you please spell the Kundalini nerve channel that you mentioned that has been recently discovered? Yes, it's called rice. Let me make sure I'm saying it right, because I just learned it yesterday. As I found this article, I was like, I can't believe I found this article. Okay, it's called Reissner, Reissner, Reissner's fiber. And I'm going to be adding that to the course. I'll have a little, I'm going to do regular updates, but I'll have a little update on that. Okay, let's see. And this course, are the individual petals discussed for each chakra? Yes, Kristen, I do talk about the petals on each chakra. Some of that, by the way, comes from a medieval music text. Harish Johari talks about it. There are different schools of thought on it. It's not cohesive, but there are a lot. You will find a lot of similarities. Also, if you really want to geek out on chakras and get into comparative study and look at all the Vedic texts and what they had to say, and all the tantric texts and what they had to say, the best book for that is Swami Shyam Sundar's book. and it's called Laya Yoga, Laya Yoga. It will put you to sleep at night because it's really dense. But if you really want to geek out on it, that is the place. Let's see. Somebody asked me to type in the name of a chakra book. The name of the book is Chakras. That's the name of the author. I will type in. Harish Johari is one, and the other one I'm going to type in is Sham Sundar Goswami. Thank you, Michael, for doing that. I appreciate it. And that book is called Laya Yoga. So I recommend both of those. Let's see. I can't believe it. I was pulled away just when you answered my question. Okay, and it will be in the replay, so just watch it there. Let's see. How are course updates handled for participants who took the course a year earlier? I'm not sure what you mean, Kim, because my course just came out yesterday. I did do a workshop. I taught a workshop last year on chakras. So if you have questions about that, just feel free to reach out to Stacy. Support at subtleyoga.com. You can always reach out to her. Thank you. Let's see who else has questions. Feel free to type questions because that's why I'm here. What's the name of the fiber you mentioned related to the central channel? Yeah, that was Ressner's. I just spelled that a couple moments ago. So Sue said the sixth chakra between the eyebrows or back of brain and lower at pineal gland. So there's some, this is still speculative whether or not it makes sense that the sixth chakra is related to the pituitary gland, because in Western science, the pituitary gland is called the master gland, and it is constantly interfacing with the thyroid, with the heart, with the adrenals, with the gonads, with the thyroid thymus, and certainly, so you get the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, right? So the pituitary gland yells at all the endocrine glands. The endocrine glands are local and they secrete hormones, right? So it makes sense that the pituitary is related to the Ajna chakra. And by the way, this is not pronounced Ajna. A better pronunciation is Ajna. You have to put your tongue in the back of the mouth. Ajna. So it's not really a hard J sound. It's more of a weird G sound. Somebody said it sounds like Three Stooges. Maybe. But anyway, it makes sense that this is connected to pituitary. And then Sahasrara, which is not here. This is Guru chakra, right above the head. The energy field, the biofield, is called Sahasrara chakra. Many people say that's connected to pineal. I go into that much more deeply in the course. And some people switch them around. So, we don't have definitive science on this yet, but it's exciting to start exploring the potential. Let's see. Can you go over the seed sounds? Someone asked. The ones that you used in the mantra during the challenge. Right. So I'm happy. These are super available out there. Lum is for the first chakra. And then Vam is for the second chakra. And by the way, the V sound is softer. Americans English speakers are the ones who say very. Most people don't V like that. They have it's softer, or W even. So anyway, and then the third chakra is Ram. The fourth chakra is Yang. The fifth chakra is Hung. The sixth chakra, Om. There's other ones too, but those are the basic. These are the basics that you'll see out there for the seed sounds. I like to use the Om and the Namaha with them, and a little bit more of a Vedic chants. But there's also the esoteric mantras, which I do not get into in the course, but you can find them like in the Bihar school books and stuff. There's other ones. Okay, and let's see. There's some more here. Chakra book, I already mentioned that. Welcome, everybody. When writing about the chakras, should the word be capitalized? I don't think so. I don't think you have to capitalize it. Zoila wrote, do you think it's appropriate to try to awaken the Ajna chakra first before awakening the lower chakras? What a great question. I am definitely going to talk about that for a moment. Dr. Yamamoto claims in his book on chakras that the lower chakras can bring alive much of the negativity, stored karma, and to control that negativity is important that the Ajna be active first. It's a really important point. So my opinion on that is, and from the research I've done and also from my own practice, is Ajna Chakra or Anahata, the heart chakra, because the heart chakra has an incredible magnetic power. And sometimes the sentiment is more powerful than the intellect, if that makes sense. The devotional, loving sentiment that comes from the heart chakra, sometimes that's more powerful or more appropriate than Ajna chakra. This is kind of classic. What you're saying, though, is kind of classic, Zoila, that control, when you have control over this, you control the rest of the system. For me as a human being, I like to get through my stuff. And, I feel like suppressing it or spiritually bypassing it, because sometimes that happens, can be, that's not so tantric, and it can be problematic in other ways too. So don't neglect or don't overlook the incredible magnetic transformative power of the heart chakra. The heart chakra has the largest biofield in the body, and you can measure it several feet off of the body. And it is constantly interacting with the brain and telling the head brain, giving the head brain messages constantly. So strong messages coming from the heart. Also the vagus nerve and how it innervates the heart and the lungs, and is very important in this understanding the physiological correlates of the chakra system as well. As we start to understand what the ventral vagus nerve does and how it's so important in social interaction, as well as keeping your meditation juicy. Meditation can be so dry and boring. The way it stays juicy is by developing loving relationship. This is like the Krishna approach, if you like, the Vaishnava approach, is developing that juicy, loving relationship with the divine within you. Keeps you juicy, it keeps you connected. Yeah, it keeps you in that state of love. And that is powerful. That's the most powerful transformative force in the universe, in my opinion. Thank you. It's such a great question. So here's another question. What chakra practices do you think are best for improving intuition? My suggestion for improving intuition or memory is connect to your higher self, because that is the source of all intuition, of all memory, of all inspiration. How do you connect to your higher source? That is the question for human beings, in my opinion, and certainly an important question at this time when we are faced with so much strife and a brand new COVID, variant, and so much divisiveness. The task at hand for human beings is, how do I connect to that which is eternal, limitless, the source of all of my energy, the source of all of my knowledge, all of my wisdom. That's the point. My husband and I developed a model. We call it the 5 eyes of knowing, that we start with knowing instinctively, and then there's intellectual knowledge. And so much of our culture gets stuck in that intellectual knowledge. We don't think there's anything beyond it. But beyond it is where we get intuitive knowledge. And then there's something beyond intuition, insight. That capacity to know that comes because we've spent time in deep intuitive places, and we know, and it just comes through you, and it's instantaneous, biofield, if you like. And then the last way of knowing is inspiration, because inspiration is what connects us to the source of all knowing. And when you get people stuck in intellect, you get all that fighting that goes on and all the polarization, right? I was watching that guy, Ben, I can't remember his last name. He was talking to Russell Brand the other day, and I was watching the two of them like kind of spar, and this intellect. Well, Russell Brand is very much more into intuition and stuff. But then you get stuck in intuition, and intuition is like, I can read tarot cards. I'm a great astrologer, and I know everything. And you can see why the yogi said that is like the biggest place you can downfall. It's all in the third pada of the Yoga Sutras, which unfortunately doesn't get talked about enough, and it's such a fascinating book. But that's intuition. Like, the intuition has such a downfall potential for it, right? And then insight is something that comes, it's like beyond intuition. You don't have to even have to work. It's like lightning. But inspiration is the thing that where we really connect with our higher self. And I think we're called for that right now. We're being called to that right now. And I see the changes that are happening in the world. I mean, it's so easy to look out there and see all the challenges going on and all the pain and all the suffering. But I think what we're going through right now is just a revolution of consciousness, and consciousness is expanding. You can't stop the expansion of consciousness. It's built into the fabric of the universe, built into the universe. And, as much as there are forces that want to backlash and bring us back down to places of, fear and, a sort of a concrete perception of the universe. The universe is a vibrating, dynamic, and ever-changing, place where we're living, and that means that we are that as well. And human beings are not just a sack of flesh and bones. We are very much vibratory, inspired, hopefully, the potential to be inspired beings that have a capacity to solve all our problems, collectively, of course. So anyway, sorry I got into that, but I think that's an important thing when we go. I don't know how I got into that, but when we talk about intuition, I think it's important. Let's see. Deb said, "Do you have any insight on how enduring death relates through the chakras?" Yes, we can talk about karma if you want, and samskaric or vasanas, impressions, karmic impressions, if you like. That certainly is the understanding from the yoga tradition, that there is a cycle, and that we cycle through this, these bodies. The bodies wear out, you get a new one, you cycle again. Whether or not you believe in reincarnation is not necessarily relevant, because we can talk about genetic material being passed down, and it's quite a similar kind of concept. So how does it get passed down? The chakras essentially are the energetic blueprint, if you like, vibrational blueprint of all your samskaric, all your karmic residue, that then get powdered, that then get crudified down into this physical body, right? So you have this energetic structure that then comes into the physical being. By the way, the energetic structure is manifestation of the mind, right? So it comes into this physical being. And as you come into this physical being, your physical structure is exactly the perfect vehicle for you to play out that karmic residue. So your body's perfect, just the way it is. When you sort of start understanding that, it kind of is mind-blowing. And everything we get from the culture about how defective our bodies are is completely erroneous. It's completely inaccurate. Your body is exactly perfect for that manifestation, which, by the way, this can be hard to take for people in chronic pain or people who have genetic, challenges, any of that stuff. So it's not about shame. It's not about blame at all. It's about this idea that this is karmic residue that you can then have the opportunity to work through. It's grist for the mill. I think you have to be super careful with the shame blame thing, though, and sometimes that's what happens. It gets too reductive. We can also look at like this, if you don't want to go to reincarnation, like this is the stuff that got passed from the ancestors. Here's my stuff to deal with the stuff that got passed on from my ancestors. If so Beth wrote, someone's root chakra is really unbalanced and they can't alter the heart chakra's messages. That's a really good point. How we think we feel heart-wise is messed up by our root fears. Yeah, root chakra, not so much second chakra, I would say, from my understanding. Root chakra is really just foundational. And yeah, some people can be messed up in the root chakra. It's possible. I tend to stay away from the word balance. I talk about like optimizing the chakras instead of balancing. We can let them function well. Let's see. Vibration of each chakra is represented by a sound. Crystals have vibration. Are there crystals that represent each, or is this a Western theory? As far as I understand it, it's a Western theory, although I have seen some ideas about what's called Rasa Shastra, Rasayana and Rasa Shastra. So that's going back into some of the medieval Tantra. They're most likely are, and Jyotish, right, which is the Indian astrology. So there's probably some correlations there. I just haven't found a good source for it. Most of the sources you find on chakras come from New Age sources. Please repeat the 5 eyes a little more slowly. Instinct, intellect. If I talk slow, I forget them. I have to go fast. Instinct, intellect, intuition, insight, and inspiration. Thank you. I'm glad you like that model. Someday I'll write it down. No, I haven't even put it in an article yet, Claudia, but someday I will. Let's see. Brenda said we have 2 sources of intuition, the third eye and the solar plexus, physical. Yeah, I wouldn't say that the solar plexus is physical intuition. I would say it's gut feelings, which if you want to call that physical intuition, that's fine. But I would say it's more instinct. Let's see. And then Kim wrote, I needed to sidestep your chakra course for being too tantric for my trilogy faith stance. I was grateful for your grace in honoring it. Yeah, that's a challenge for some folks. I hope, and it's the challenge that goes the other way too. Like I've apologized to folks that may come from a Hindu orientation and be offended by looking at the chakras from a neuroscience and Jungian perspective. So like I'm kind of getting it. I get it from all sides, but thank you for being so gracious, Kim, because I certainly don't want to interfere with or offend anybody's belief system. Okay, I have a few more questions to read and then we'll wrap it up for the day. I don't see, if you want to write your questions in there, go right ahead, but I don't see any more. Okay, so I got, like, as I said, almost 200 questions. I got a lot of questions. So I can't read all of them, but there was a couple that I wanted to read. Joanne wrote, I need to do a practice just for me and from a teacher that I trust. And that's why she joined the challenge. Thank you. I'm glad. Somebody wrote, I'm not going to read names, sorry. So somebody wrote, I've been teaching yoga through the chakras based on Anodea Judith's work. And I very much want to know how that differs and be more yogic. How that differs, and to move more towards the yogic model, but I don't know what that means yet. I'm very excited to learn. So if that is you, or if that resonates with you, please take my course. And you can start with Chakras Beyond the Rainbow, so at least you get situated in understanding the difference. And then if you want to do the neuroscience of the neuroscience and psychology of the chakras, that will take you on a much deeper dive. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping is I feel like the resources for yoga teachers about chakras are really limited. You have very scholarly work on one side, and then on the other hand, you have very new agey stuff, and we need stuff that's more accessible for yoga people, I think. Let's see, here's another one. I'd love to hear something about how the chakras can affect healing, especially as related to stored tension. Right. So stored tension, we can also call that intrinsic tension. And intrinsic tension means the muscles holding on to tension. They know, when you're under anesthesia, your body is just like, because all the intrinsic tension goes away. But we do hold it, and we're holding on to it with the nervous system, but it's below the level of consciousness. So this is happening, this is intersecting with parts of the brain that are, brain stem areas, which are very hard to access with the front brain. So it's hard to let go of tension. Doesn't mean we can. And I think all the practices like Shavasana, Yoga Nidra, all the asanas help us to become aware so we can let go. The key aspect of neuroplasticity, the number one key way to elicit positive neuroplastic changes is awareness. That's Dan Siegel's work. Bring awareness into your practice, and that's how we start to deal with tension. Now, how is this related to chakras? Chakras are kind of the transfer stations of these mental emotional tendencies, and as we gain greater and greater access to the chakras, we're able to deal with the intrinsic tension in the body. Let's see, how do I stay safe and grounded when I'm under pressure? She says, I can slip into mild psychosis, and sometimes yoga can make that worse. Can you suggest a safe way to do chakra work? Yeah, so the first thing I would say, if somebody's going into mild psychosis, which also could be called dissociation, I believe, when you kind of are leaving your body, this is not uncommon for folks with trauma histories. And that trauma history may be your own, but it might also come from your ancestors. So how do you stay grounded? So keeping the eyes open is important, and coming into sensations in the body is very important. That is being said with the caveat that you are working with a licensed mental health professional who is helping you to identify and address dissociation or psychosis in a clinical way, because and not all therapists are the same. So like try some different ones if the ones that you're using aren't working so well. But this is really important because that's a diagnosis, and it's out of scope of practice for yoga teachers and even yoga therapists. And at the same time, yoga can be very complementary to any work that you're doing. Any other licensed work that you're doing can be very complementary. Somebody said, I'd love to know how to address ego. I used to practice Ashtanga and can no longer due to injuries. Okay, so I'm not sure what the link is between ego and Ashtanga. It may be that you're talking about that. Oftentimes with difficult asana styles, there's sort of a drive to perform, and then your ego gets hurt when you can't perform. That's possible. So my suggestion is practice with me, because my practice is all about being where you are and feeling great about it. So, and it's quite different than strenuous, hot, or, I don't want to bash Ashtanga yoga. I don't, that's fine if people practice it, but it is very hard. And if that's the connection you're making, then that's what I would suggest. Okay, I'm going to read 2 more questions. One is, a Reiki person recently told me that my chakras needed 911. And once they balanced them, it's like something was draining from me. It didn't feel good. What are your thoughts about chakras needing 911? I'm not a Reiki practitioner. I am a trained shiatsu practitioner, craniosacral therapist. I've done tons of body work in my life. I love working on other people's energy bodies and their physical bodies. And what I'm talking about right now is about you working on your own energy body. And that's what I think is so revolutionary about the chakras. This is about you gaining knowledge to be able to make that transformation yourself. It's so amazing. When you think about, like, my course, I think we're selling it right now for $97. Like, you could get maybe 1 or maybe 2 sessions with a healer for that much money. I'm teaching you stuff that you can use for the rest of your life, to be able to go into the system, to work with the system, and to create greater balance and greater function of the chakras. I mean, that's where it is. So do your chakras need 911? I don't know. Does your whole life need 911? Because that's what your chakras are. It's your whole life. If your whole life needs that, then you probably need a physician and a psychotherapist and a physical therapist and maybe an occupational therapist and maybe an acupuncturist, and you probably need everything to help you if your life is that completely, of a mess, because your chakras are everything. Now, the specific piece of, like, why do you feel drained after the session? I don't know, but I do know that the body is emitting biophotons, and sometimes, particularly with healers, you're giving off a lot of very low, very difficult to detect, actually, biophotons from your hands. And that could possibly be draining. I'm not sure why you felt drained when the person worked on you, though. I can't really answer that question. Sorry. I hope I did the best I could. Okay. Let's see. I think that's it. There are a lot of other questions, but I think that's it, because we're just rapidly running out of time here. So I'm going to see if there's any other questions. Which chakras would be related to ancestral healing? Largely, Suzanne asked that, largely your, it would be largely your second chakra. The second chakra is really the reciprocal of a lot of traumatic experiences, ancestral as well as in this lifetime. So second chakra is because that's what it makes sense. It's where we're carrying on that genetic material. Kim asked, how much of your neuroscience course is focused on Kundalini, multiple gods, and universe accessing? So my course is kind of split into the first part of each. So first of all, I talk about, like, the whole perspective of the yogis and where they're coming from cosmologically. And then I go into each chakra, and that's kind of split up between what we can take the images and the iconography of each chakra and understand it in terms of the translation and what the yogis were trying to say, psycho-emotionally, psycho-spiritually. And then the second part of it is all about the neuroscience of those different parts of your body and how those are potentially the chakras. Let's see. And Ruby said, thank you. I find this so interesting. I'm in the process of learning more about the course Chakras Beyond the Rainbow. Oh, good. So Chakras Beyond the Rainbow is kind of like my intro. We call it the prequel, but like any good Star Wars movie, you can jump in anywhere with my courses. So the prequel to, I hope you got my prequel joke. Sorry. The prequel to the neuroscience and psychology of the chakras is called Chakras Beyond the Rainbow. And that was the first course I put out about 3-4 months ago as a way to give yoga teachers some understanding about the difference between the chakra systems and, what the yogis were talking about and how it's a little bit different. So I hope that course is useful for you. Carla said, I recently had a vagal episode and passed out. Ooh, you vagaled out. I had to go to the ER. I'm a caregiver for my husband with Parkinson's. Yeah, vagaling out can happen, Carla. Caregiving is a really stressful experience. Lots of people know that it's a stressful task. And so you got to take really good care of yourself. Make sure you're doing some yoga every day if you can. At least put your legs up the wall. Thank you for saying Chakras Beyond the Rainbow was fabulous. I'm glad you liked it. Okay, I think I'm going to finish. Unless you have any more questions, I think I'm going to finish up now. And the course itself is out there. You should have gotten a link. I also put the link in the description of this presentation. So feel free to email us if you have questions, support@subtleyoga.com if you're interested in the course. I wish you a lovely weekend. I wish you very happy chakras, and I hope I see you again soon. Thanks so much for being here. All the best. Take care.